Thanks.
Good morning. I'm going to use policy 141.2 as an example. It is, if you look at the policy, the very top says that it belongs to the, like they call it a book, but it belongs to the policy manual as opposed to other portions of a library that you could set up in a policy. But right now we only have what's called our policy manual. And the section is the 100 series, which falls under the Board of Education. And the title of this one is the Board Officer Duties, and the code is 141.2. So we refer to that as policy 141.2, Board Officer Duties. The status, once they are all complete by the end of this month, that status will say active. As we work through policies, that status will change, and it will say things like in progress or in revision, or it could change to retired when we retire a policy. Typically what will happen is one will be retired, but there might be one that is currently active as a replacement policy. It could be that it gets retired. We used to quote unquote delete policies, but in the board doc system, it will retire the policy. So you'll always see that retired policy under the retired policies. It won't be permanently deleted and gone. For years, they were just deleted out of our system. In the past couple of years, I've tried to keep record of the ones that we deleted. We have had a couple instances where we've gone back and referred to those and taken portions of them if we've brought a similar policy back. A good example of that recently was the bullying policy. The adopted date is the date that this policy or a policy under a similar name or similar type of policy was first adopted or approved by the board. In our old style of policy, we called it approved. Board Docs calls it adopted. So in this case, it's December 6th of 1977. Last revised is the last time that the board and Policy and Personnel Committee took it up, made revisions, did the first and second reading on it as a board, and approved any revision that was a significant revision of any kind. Prior revised dates, we usually keep 2 to 3 revision dates, so you can see a history of how often the policy was changed. This one was 1995, 2013, 2017, and the last revised was 2019. We have some policies that are changed on a much more yearly basis. Sometimes they're changed more than once a year. Sometimes that's dependent on how often the law changes or how often the district needs to change it. Sometimes it comes from a directive from the state, local, federal government. It just depends on what the policy is. And then below there is the body of the policy, and in this case it starts and it's broken down by the president, vice president, treasurer, clerk, and secretary roles. And if you turn to the third page of that policy, after the board secretary roles, you can see that there are legal references, and there are 4 in the 120 state statutes, which are the Wisconsin state statutes. And then there's cross-references. So on this particular policy, you can see that the cross-reference is to policy 141.1, board officer elections. Not every policy will have a legal reference, and not every policy will have a cross-reference. Many do, and they'll be listed below there like that. If you turn to the very next page, in the ones that we printed for you, Policy 142, Legal Counsel. It's set up the same way, but if you look at the very bottom of the page, there's a reprinted date of September 1996 and September 1997. Several of the policies have gone through reprints. A reprint basically means that there was something that was found to be inaccurate in the policy, such as a typographical error, or sometimes the numbering system will change. When I first started working with policy 10 years ago, our business assistant superintendent at the time went through the 600 series and totally renumbered the system because the numbering had gotten very askew compared to the numbering system that we now use, which is very similar to WASB's numbering system. So we went through that entire policy. They revised and updated policies, but several of them didn't need any change in terms of verbiage or the intent of the policy was. It just needed a new number. So that was considered a reprint. It can also be reprinted if, as our district so often likes to do, change titles of administrators or departments. So a lot of times those reprints happen because as I'm working with policies, I might see one that I know that the title has changed or the department name has changed, or I find some typographical errors or something, and then I'll just make those changes because it's not changing the intent of the policy, therefore it doesn't need to necessarily go to the policy committee, or it might go to the policy committee just to make note that that's what I've done with it if there's significant amount of title changes. If there's any change to a policy that changes the intent, then it does have to go to policy committee and to the full board, and I would never make changes like that without it going to a committee or something. I typically don't make those changes. Those usually come either from administration or a board member who sees it, or it would come down from WASB, or like I said, the state or federal government would make suggestions to those, and then somebody would bring those forward. That's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Okay, any questions about policies? Amy, I see you unmuted. Go ahead if you have any. Amy, are you talking right now? I see you're unmuted, but but we can't hear you if you are. Can everybody else hear us out there?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
You might have to restart your computer.
Okay. Okay, are there any other questions? Well, I see Amy's muted. Okay. Okay. Yeah, she's muted now. Are there any other questions about policy?
No, that was really helpful. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Michelle.
All right, and Michelle is our resource. If you, I would like to say, if you're wondering if there is a policy about something, or you say, gosh, I remember a policy about something. I mean, this happens to me once, probably like every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm like, Michelle, can you help me find this policy? And she can usually steer you in the right direction. All right, so that is going to bring us to 2A, the effective school board activity. And for this one, I'm going to use the wireless mic. And, okay. Amy, Dan said you may have to restart your computer. Yeah, Dean said you may have to restart your computer or sign out and sign back in.
Can I ask a question while we wait?
Absolutely.
Okay, so when it comes to policies, like changes, do they only go through like the policy committee? Or can changes be applied like within like the whole board? How does that work?
Any board member has the right to suggest changes to a policy, and that would have to be a discussion with the chair of the Policy and Personnel Committee saying, hey, I would like this. I saw this policy. It needs to be changed. And I would also suggest working with Michelle because as we modify policies, the formatting showing those, like to indicate what's changed, there's a special formatting process that we use so that you can read those changes. But it doesn't have to be only the Policy and Personnel Committee that recommends those changes. So any board member can suggest changes to policy, and then the majority of them actually come from administration as laws change, as they practices need to change within the district, then they bring forward changes also. All right, Amy, can you hear okay?
Can you hear
Oh,
me?
oh, and we can hear you. Hooray. So did you have a question about the policy? About the policy section?
I did. So in the policy that was listed on board doc, for example, 185, which was the standing board committee one, it has reviewed June 11th, 2013, but then it has a much more recent revision date, May 1st, 2018. So I didn't understand how it could be revised without being reviewed. Is there something I'm missing?
Reviewed just means that somebody, typically a board member in the 100 series, like the 500 series would be our human resources department. The 700 series is typically like Joanne's department or Sean. 300s and 400s could be like the school leadership department or the special ed pupil services department. Would have looked at the policy, reviewed it to see if what it says is still accurate and being currently practiced, or whether it needs to be updated and revised. That's what reviewed means. It doesn't mean that anything was done to the policy other than it was reviewed to see if it is still current and accurate. When a different board member was leading the Policy Personnel Committee about 5 years ago, probably now closer to 7 or 8, since 2013 was one of the dates that you mentioned was a review date. She wanted like the entire series of all of the policies to be reviewed. And so she had requested that each department look at their policies and each of the 100 series, she broke into chunks for each of the board members to go through and review and determine whether they needed to be revised or updated or just have title changes made so that they would have that reprint to them, things like that. So that was exactly what the reviewed date meant. We don't do a big formal review like that and mark everything reviewed very often, but that's what those reviewed dates mean.
That makes sense. So I get how something can be reviewed without being revised, but I don't get how something can be revised without being reviewed. And then the other point was, could we get a key and then post that wherever the current policies are going to be posted in board docs? So when people are reading these, they know what approved, revised, reprinted, etc. mean.
Sure, I could make a key that explains what each of those terms mean. When a policy is revised, you're obviously reviewing it in order to revise it, so we don't have a duplicate date of reviewed and revised. Reviewed means it was only reviewed and no changes were made. If it's revised, you've obviously looked at it, read it, and made revisions to it. That's why it's revised versus reviewed. So it's just establishing a difference between the two.
Perfect. I think a key would be really helpful. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Any other questions about policies? Okay. So I would encourage everyone just to take you don't have to memorize it, but just thumb through, because then it usually triggers something later, like, yes, we do have a policy about this, then you can go back and look for it. And this is by far where we spend most of our time living. Okay. So that's going to bring us to the next activity is the 8 characteristics of effective school boards, which is found on page 56 in the key work of school boards. And I apologize for administrators the cabinet members who don't have the book, and the public, since we can't put this on board docs since it's copyrighted material. We can't just scan the pages and put it out there for everyone to look at. So I've written the 8 characteristics up behind us, and in a short exercise, because we're eating up, I want to do due diligence, but we started on the short end of the stick. We're going to pick out key words in each one of those characteristics, and then we're going to talk about how that affects us here in the school district of Beloit. Okay? So I'm going to go to my wireless mic. Dean said that this one isn't quite as clear as one of these, but I just wanted the flexibility to be able to move around. All right.
Could you give the page number again, please?
Yep, it's 56. Can you hear me? I'm on the wireless now. I just want to make sure everyone remotely can hear. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And it was perfect that the workshop on Thursday actually referenced this book. I totally have that planned. So the first characteristic is effective school boards commit to a vision of high expectations for student achievement and quality instruction and define goals toward that vision. So what are, and this might be a little bit trickier, but what are the key words? Go ahead and unmute and kind of shout them out. If you're...
High expectations.
High expectations.
Quality instruction.
Quality instruction.
Student achievement.
Equitable.
Clear goals.
Clear goals. And then I also heard student achievement.
Kyle, did you pick?
Where are the clear goals? Oh, define goals. Okay. Perfect. Anything else? Okay. So now the other question I have is then how do you think this relates to the school district of Beloit where we are now? Whether it's an area of opportunity, something we're strong on, or or just thoughts about how this relates to us?
I think we need, maybe I'm off here, but my suggestion would be, I think that we need sorry, it's going to be loud, policy and processes to make sure that we can be accountable as a district to achieving those things.
And policies and processes to ensure accountability?
Yeah, so that so we as a leadership entity are accountable, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you start there, if we're accountable, okay, well, we're accountable, we're on the line, right? So how do we ensure that these things happen? I feel like that sets us in a good direction for accountability as a district.
Okay, so are you thinking more just accountability at holding the board accountable, or when you say accountability, are you thinking just the board or the whole organization?
I feel like if we have accountability as a board, it will create accountability throughout the organization.
Okay. Other thoughts? Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, we need to redefine or redo the strategic plan so that we can have clearer goals. I think right now I feel like they have not been stated or even followed for quite a long time.
On that subject, maybe this is the goal, and so this doesn't belong here, but I was just reflecting on the things that we initiated the conversation with, and one thing that I brought up a couple of times, and I think a lot of us agree with, is a desire to have to remove predictability of outcomes for students. So it's kind of like an equity issue. Where does that belong? Is that an accountability piece, or is that a student achievement piece, or does that just belong in goals, when we do have a strategic plan?
I think we can, as we go through the process, we can find a place for that. Right now, I'm trying to just kind of pull out everything that we're thinking. And that's why this is on paper, because I will save these and we'll come back to them and pull them out as we continue to work together as a board. So it's really just documenting our thoughts and where we are now and work with that we think we need to do this year. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you for clarifying.
No problem. Okay. Any other thoughts on this first one? Okay. The second characteristic is effective school boards have strong shared beliefs and values about what is possible for students and their ability to learn, and of the system and its ability to teach all children at high levels. So what are the key words, the important words popping out of this one for everyone?
All students.
Okay.
Shared
Values.
beliefs and values.
Okay, shared beliefs and values.
Not just one word, but the system's responsibility to teach all children at high levels.
Okay. 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 Anything else in this one that jumps out and stands out? Okay, so now how does this relate to us in the school district of Beloit?
I think it's incumbent on the board to just be very proactive with removing barriers that are presented to our students to learn. And that could be because of a number of reasons, but to be mindful of removing those barriers so that we can provide a high quality education for all of our students.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I also think that adapting to their own individual needs, for all children, being able to adapt to their learning abilities.
Okay. Sue?
I was going to say something very similar, really to continually keep the focus on all students, and especially when we have a diverse community.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay,
I have another one, Kyle.
sure.
I think that the statement about strong, or the part of the statement about strong shared beliefs and values, I think that's one of the things you're doing right now, is trying to get out the things that all board members have in common as far as their beliefs for what we need to do for the students and support staff. And it also means, to me, shared with the administration, the educators, that whole shared piece, that we're
Okay.
not operating separately or in silos, and that we truly are sharing in that direction.
Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Moving on to number 3. Effective school boards are accountability driven, spending less time on operational issues and more time focused on policies to improve student achievement. What words stand out in number 3?
Student achievement.
Accountability driven.
Focus on policies.
Any other words that stand out to anyone? Okay, so how does this apply to us right now in the school district of Beloit?
What this makes me think of is the importance of balancing our priorities.
Okay,
I would agree with that, because when you balance priorities, it's not so overwhelming, and we can create those systems of accountability that are necessary to actually achieve those priorities.
okay. Any other thoughts for number 3?
I think it speaks to what Amy and Megan said, but making sure that when it says spending less time on operational, we have to be careful that we're not micromanaging.
If I can piggyback on that, I think that's a really important point to bring up. So I think that making sure that all of these things are done with collaboration alongside of admin is pretty key.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that one as well. To me, that means that we make sure that the administration continually brings updates and information to the board to keep you informed.
And I will piggyback on that, because as I'm thinking through what Sue just said, I think the updates and information is really important. And we as board members need to be really clear about our own metrics and specifically what information we need, so that we're respectful both of the admin time and also so we can be more efficient and productive in meetings.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I had one thought with this one, where it's really, with the strategic plan expiring at the end of June, we really don't have anything to hold anyone accountable to. So we don't, so right now in the school district, we have like an absence of a document or a plan to hold everybody accountable. So I'm just going to add like lack of a plan. Okay. Anything else for number 3? Okay. Number 4, effective school boards have a collaborative relationship with staff and the community and establish a strong communication structure to inform and engage both internal and external stakeholders in setting and achieving goals. What are the key words that pop out to everybody in this one?
Communication.
Collaboration
Okay.
or collaborative relationships.
Okay. John, did somebody? I thought you had your finger on the button.
She took mine, but let's put in there community.
Okay.
This isn't explicitly listed, but what it made me think of is before all of that can happen, we need to be intentional about letting internal and external partners know that we welcome their feedback. Like their feedback is vital in order for us to do our job well.
Okay, and that makes me think, when you said that, Amy, that makes me think of relationship. So intentional, can you say that again? My mind jumped, Amy, I'm sorry.
No problem. That before all of the things that we just listed, which are great, can happen, we need to make sure that our internal and external partners know that we welcome their feedback, that it's critical to have in order for us to do our job well. So definitely that speaks to relationships, so relationship maintenance.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Moving on to number 5. Effective school boards are data savvy. They embrace and monitor data even when the information is negative and use it to drive continuous improvement. This one makes my heart happy.
Continuous improvement.
Okay.
Monitor.
Any other words or phrases jumping out?
Data.
Data.
I'm sorry. The phrase, even when the information is negative, I think is critical because we can make our best strides when we look at where we're weak and where we need to improve and really focus strongly on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't really like the word negative, but, it's there. But
yeah.
I do think that's critical.
Okay. Any other?
Jumping in on what you said, sorry.
Go ahead.
You're doing so well with this, Kyle, too. Thank you. And it's got to be hard with all these different mediums. Jumping in on what Stephanie said, I know it's cheesy, but our biggest shortfalls, those are our biggest opportunities for growth. And I think that those opportunities should be how we kind of identify those priorities that we're going to balance, So I think it's a positive, constructive way to look at things.
And Megan, I like that word shortfall better. Yes.
And what it implies to me is that you take the data for what it is. We have to be very secure and not defensive and just go where the data goes and be willing to say, hey, this is an area where we can improve and we're going to use this data to direct how we improve.
I'll second that. And I think it's very important because no matter what we do, we will always have, negative information come in and positive as well. Sometimes we wish that we had more positive, but not taking the negative data that comes to us in personal way, and use it really to grow.
Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I would echo that too as well, Kyle. I think that a lot of times that even with staff and administration, we don't want to have them try to sugarcoat information to make it look better than what it really is. I mean, we need to be honest with ourselves about things. And I think the public and the community will appreciate that a lot more. And I think staff will appreciate it as well, and administration, because they don't feel like they have to, make stuff up.
Sure. Okay.
I think that would make us more human too, knowing that we make mistakes too, and it's important for for the community to know that, once we know that we have made that mistake, it's easier to resolve a problem.
Yeah, one thing I want to make sure is that people know, like, they can come to us when there is an issue so that we can actually address it too.
Okay.
But there's also a piece of accountability there as well. I think that we need to make sure that, when somebody does come forward and they say, yes, we fell short on this goal or this objective, but here's the plan going forward, and then they come back with solutions. That would be an expectation.
Okay. Sue?
And if you keep the purpose of why do we gather data, it's to continually analyze and make improvements. And the focus is always working on continual improvements.
Okay. Thank you.
Kyle,
Yeah.
I would echo what everybody's saying, because really the purpose of data is just not to collect it and look at it, it's to drive our instruction.
Yeah.
And effectively to drive our instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very, very important that it's not a blame game. The data is what it is,
Yeah.
and let's take it and move forward.
Okay. I also apologize for people who are watching YouTube that we only have so much wall space where the cameras can view, so this might be a little bit hard to see, but hopefully with the discussion that you're hearing kind of makes up for not being able to see it so well. Any other thoughts on number 5? Okay, moving right along to number 6. Effective school boards align and sustain resources such as professional development to meet district goals. What words?
Meet district goals.
Meet district goals.
And professional development?
Professional development.
Align.
Align. Any other words jumping out at anybody?
Professional development. Professional development needs to be relevant to the teachers.
Well, this is a question I would have is and this is my interpretation, I don't believe professional development is for the teachers. I believe professional development is for the board, because the board doesn't have the active role in professional development for teachers. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Good point, Kyle.
If we read further in that one, it does, talk about the importance of successful boards supported extensive professional development programs for administrators and teachers, even in times when there are, difficulties with your financial situation.
Okay.
And I think, to me, it's like that full loop of the district supporting the direction for our instruction, for our teachers and our administrators, and making sure that they are continually provided the opportunity of professional development, but not in a vacuum, that information is brought back to the board in different ways.
Okay. So PD, whoops.
In that effort to continually support and encourage improvements in student achievement.
Okay.
But I hear what you're saying also,
Yeah.
Kyle, because professional development is equally important and ongoing for our board members.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think the ability to be flexible with professional development, in our current situation, we may have had PD planned, but now we need to shift to focus on online learning, etc.
Okay. So it'd be fair to say, like in the topics as well as the manner or the delivery?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And that kind of goes with what Stephanie was saying, PD relevance.
Yeah, because Kyle, I would hear that often, and even when I was a teacher, their teachers are so busy, and now more than ever, and to sit through a PD that they don't feel pertains to them, they feel it's a waste of their time, and I frankly, I think it is. That's why I think we just need to, not the board, the district, and just needs to always make sure that they're getting input from the staff and that the staff are getting what they need to improve their teaching, their instruction.
Okay. Any other
Even
thoughts
that
on number
teachers
6?
feel much more empowered and valued.
Okay.
And Stephanie, I absolutely agree with you, but I just want to make sure that we have a good understanding that would be the role of administration. And this, number 6 is talking about aligning and sustaining resources on the part of the board to support professional development of our staff.
So that would look like,
I hear you, Sue, I know.
so that would look, so I think that really just comes back to, for example, this coming year, we have no idea what's happening with the budget. We have no idea how much money we're getting. We have no idea what's happening with people count, nothing. So then that means that we don't say, oh, well, we're going to chop professional development because that's an easy way to save money. So just knowing that it's important. Okay, any other thoughts on 6 before we move on to 7? All right, number 7, effective school boards lead as a united team with the superintendent, each from their respective roles with strong collaboration and mutual trust.
Strong collaboration.
Collaboration and trust.
United team.
Okay. All right. Any other words? Spencer, you have your mic on?
No, these are the ones.
Okay. Okay. Roles pops out to me also. Okay, so now how does this apply to us here in the school district of Beloit?
I think it's important for us to have trust in each other, and to really work as a team. Not just administration and the board, but also consider the community to be part of that team. I think we really should run, the board based on based on our, team collaboration. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Kyle, we are an extension of the community, so that's basically what we need to be representative of. But I think as well, we need to also, I think all of us, as we've stepped into our roles or been in our roles, we realize pretty quickly that there's a lot of information that the public is unaware of that, in the decision-making process. So balancing it between being the representative, but also obviously serving the good of the school itself, the district as a whole.
Okay.
To add to what John said, I think it's important to let the community know why we make decisions, because sometimes it's very easy for us to just, make a decision, but if we don't have an explanation to the why, it makes it hard for them to understand too.
Okay. Stephanie, were you talking if I heard a voice out there?
Yeah, it was me. The board itself, we have to be a united team, and I feel we are. I feel we have a very strong board, and we need to continue that and continue to work on our relationships and just stay strong.
I think an important component of that is when we do disagree, which we will, that we do it agreeably.
Yes, absolutely. We can agree to disagree, and we need to be respectful at all times.
Okay. Great. Any other thoughts on number 7, Sue?
I think this one also speaks to what everyone's been doing these last several weeks of being able to learn together and lay a very strong foundation of roles and responsibilities.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anything else for 7? All right. Moving on to number 8 then, the last one. Effective school boards take part in team development and training, sometimes with their superintendent, to build shared knowledge, values, and commitments for their improvement efforts.
Team development.
Knowledge and values.
Okay.
Improvement efforts.
Okay. Any other words jumping out?
For me, the sometimes, which says that sometimes it's best for the board to meet amongst itself, to be on the same page with our role and responsibility before we unite with the superintendent and the cabinet.
Okay. Okay, any thoughts about how this, Amy, I'm writing what you just said down. Any other thoughts about how this affects us in the school district of Beloit today?
Kyle, I think this retreat, what we have experienced over the last several meetings kind of is a testament to this itself. I mean, we need to have deliberate training for all members, not just new members, but all members on a continuous basis. Because I think oftentimes we can sometimes lose sight as far as what our roles and responsibilities are, and we need to keep on track there.
Thank you.
And like you said,
I'd like
for the webinar that we watched, like you even said that even as a board member from previous years, that just watching that was a great way to kind of refresh yourself. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay. Go ahead. Is that Megan?
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off that because I feel like what I've gleaned from this second retreat and from the one that we had before is it's easy for us sometimes to get narrowly focused or driven by feelings of urgency. And there's, we're all in an overwhelming situation right now with COVID. And I think that it's just healthy, regular, just to have these, not regular, I want to do this every weekend, no offense, but just to have kind of periodic regular check-ins just so we can reset, same page, check on those relationships because to the point that Amy and Stephanie and others have made, we have to be unified, we have to maintain focus, and it's impossible to do that without creating a space to regularly have those check-ins. Because we're always going to be hit with 50 things. It feels like a hailstorm sometimes, you know, and it's just easy to lose focus.
Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts on number 8? Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to save these and we'll keep coming back to them. And this is going to bring us to the board norms. Michelle, are you able to put those up? Everyone received a revised copy, and the revisions were attached to board docs. So really just reviewing them, seeing if the changes that we had suggested are represented in this document, and then we can adopt them today if someone wants to make a motion, if everybody thinks it's okay.
We also have the ability to, if something doesn't look right, we can edit it right here.
One quick point, Kyle. One thing that concerned me is in the last meeting when you came to future board items, when I went to bring one up, you abruptly directed me to board docs. So it may be a good idea if you don't want to entertain future board items in the meeting, if we make that one of our norms and remove it from the agenda, and then that way all board members will know that the norm is we go to board docs and submit that.
Thank you. I did ask Michelle to do that, and it's just an easy way for me to keep those requests and everything organized, so I don't have it written on a piece of paper and it gets lost. So then that way they're all in one place.
So will future agenda items be removed from the agenda?
Yes.
If we're doing that for transparency, could we just make sure, since this is such a new system for the next couple of meetings, to just like give a quick pitch to direct the public on how to find that tracking sheet in the library so people can kind of see?
Absolutely.
I know it probably gets a little redundant, but I think that would be appreciated by people. Everybody, you know, it's new things are hard to make a good habit. You know what I mean? Thanks.
Yep. So is there anything on the, does anybody see anything on the norms that didn't get changed correctly?
So do we need to write a new norm under communication to direct all board members to put future board items on the Google Doc?
I'm sorry, Amy, did you say, were you asking Sue?
No, I was asking you.
Oh, okay, no, I'm sorry. When you said so, I thought you said Sue. I'm sorry. We can, so that would be under communication.
Would it be helpful at the end of a meeting to just have the president give a reminder to board members to any future agenda items that you would request? Make sure you record those in board docs.
Yep.
Just a reminder.
So, so how about agenda requests will be submitted on board docs and president will remind members of process. Is that an okay wording for everybody? So that's under communication, Michelle, adding a number 9.
I mean, it's fine either way, but
So it's a future agenda requests.
Kyle,
Yeah, Amy? Amy?
it just seems a little cumbersome to me to remind us at can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
You can hear
It
us?
seems a little cumbersome to me to remind us at every meeting. Oh, is
Okay.
that a yes?
Megan, are you okay with that? We added on because Megan had suggested it.
So Amy, let me clarify. I guess I suggested it so that people watching or in the crowd would understand that if they wanted to see what future agenda items were coming, that there's a point of reference that's like transparent and visible to the public, because this is something we've never done before. And I mean, even just like we've gotten an email recently about poor communication and transparency. So I was just thinking for the next couple of meetings, we could say like anybody watching who's curious about what board members are submitting for upcoming agenda items can find it here. Maybe just for, maybe just through like July or something, so people can kind of get used to it. Or maybe we just print something right on the agenda in board docs if that's less cumbersome. I just want to make sure people have the information that they need.
Okay. Michelle nodded that we could
I
print.
agree, because it seems, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I agree with Megan, because it seems overly cumbersome to not receive future board agendas in the meeting, but to remind us at every meeting to submit them.
Okay, then I won't remind you to submit them. We'll just put it on the agenda.
So Kyle, clarification, is there new number 9 that says future agenda requests will be submitted on or through board docs?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? We're not going through it piece by piece because we did that already.
I just had one quick question.
Sure, Spencer.
So as things change, can we go back and review this and revise it and kind of treat it as like a living, breathing document throughout the year instead of because I want to make sure that's not like a locked away.
Yep.
Once we set it, we have to hold
Yep,
it.
absolutely. It's something we can always come back and revise to. And even with the goals, as we get a little bit further in the superintendent search and we have some deadlines more attached to that and processes in place, we can add those timelines and add those to our goals. So these are both living, breathing documents, just like a strategic plan or anything else that we really use in education. Any other questions or comments, or if somebody wants to, if somebody's welcome to make a motion to approve them. Michelle did type number 9 onto the document. Okay, so does everybody just need a couple more minutes, or is everybody kind of ready to move on?
I'm good.
Okay.
We need a motion on this? Yeah. I move to approve the adoption of the board norms created for the 2021 board year as amended.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the 2020-21 board norms as amended. Any further discussion or questions? Okay. Seeing no one unmuting, no one in the boardroom, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the 2020-21 board norms are approved. Which brings us to the next agenda item, board goals. So just as the board norms are, this is a living, breathing document, as I kind of alluded to. As we get more information about the superintendent search, we can put that in there and re-adopt them. Were there any questions or comments about the board goals?
I have a quick question about number 3 on goal 1. The board will develop, sorry. About the tool, number 2. A self-evaluation tool will be adopted, and it says in May. Are we using the WASB tool or a different tool?
That's something we have to discuss. We used the WASB tool previously that they mentioned on Thursday's workshop. but we can talk about that on Thursday. Like for example, 2 years ago, we only used the board goals. We didn't use a second tool to evaluate the board. And then last year, somebody had an idea to use the WASB one also. So that's a decision we'll have to make. Because there are
Okay.
options, yeah.
Hey, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I was just reflecting on a thought I had earlier, and I'm looking at board governance and accountability, so number 1, and then action step number 9. I'd mentioned this to a couple of you. I had a call from somebody earlier this week, and she had to just like find my phone number from a neighbor because she didn't have access to the internet and just didn't have any way to like find how to contact us. So on number 9, with the minutes will be approved at the next like meeting, et cetera, could we just include in there that if everybody's all right with it, for us just to publish like our names, our contact information, so including phone number and email, so that it's printed in the paper. So in case somebody has a question about something, they don't have to go online if there's a technology barrier there.
Sure. So you want that added? So, Meg, if I hear you correctly, then every time Michelle would send minutes to the Beloit Daily News be published, that our information would be published.
Yeah,
Michelle,
just like maybe just like versus like minutes. Like Michelle, let
Yeah.
me ask you for guidance on that. Is there like a standard formatting so you don't have to go through the trouble of like typing that every time? Like could we do a header or something? What do you think?
I'd have to look into seeing if I could add it to a header, but we pay by the word for every time. So I don't know if you'd want it on every single set of minutes that we send, because legals will usually publish all of them at once from a given month that we send them in. So I don't know if you'd just want it on one set of minutes or how you want that. I do know that.
But I'll defer to the group. Michelle, that makes a ton of sense, and I'm so glad that you pointed that out. What does everybody else think? Is it worth it?
Because we do also have people that call the COLAC Center and
I
ask
think if
for
we just
contact
include it-
information.
But they might not have the number for COLAC.
True.
what if we sent it with our business meeting minutes? So then it's once a month because we only have one business meeting a month. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of.
I open that.
Okay,
And even if it was just our,
go ahead, Amy.
just even if it was to cut down on words, our name and our name and our phone number. I don't think anyone's interested in visiting us.
That's what I was thinking. Just name and number.
I agree.
Okay, so adding on to number 9, do you think we should add on to number 9, or should we create one separately? We could just add on to number 9, the business minutes from the business meeting will include board member names and telephone numbers. Does that wording sound okay?
That sounds wonderful to me, as long as it's okay with Michelle and everybody else.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of head nodding and body language agreement, Megan.
All right, sounds good to me. I'd like to include that then in number 9. Thanks for taking the time to hash through that with me.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about the goals? Or a motion if anybody's ready. And again, Michelle has this document.
I move that we adopt.
Oh, go ahead, Amy. Sorry.
No, no problem. I move that we adopt the 2020-2021 board goals as amended.
I'll second that.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the 2020-2021 board goals as amended. Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Seeing no one unmuting and, oh, Stephanie?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and forgive me, I'm just seeing something.
okay.
Under, is this appropriate to say I see something under 2, student progress and growth, number 1 action step?
Okay,
I missed it. It's saying the board will schedule on the board calendar superintendent reports October, March, and July,
mm-hmm.
determining student progress of state and local assessment tools. Sue, and here's a quick question for Sue. Sue, aren't we doing map testing 3 times a year yet? Fall, winter, spring?
Yes, and the third one was affected because of the COVID-19 this year.
Sure. I'm just wondering if we, and you're the superintendent right now, so do you think we would need another report in there from the winter map? Because we still use those pretty heavily, correct? In informing our instruction?
Sure, Peg is on board. I can let her respond to that.
I'm sorry, Sue, I didn't catch it all.
Peg Mellencamp is on board with our conversation. Maybe she could respond to that.
Oh, yes, Peggy, thank you.
Good morning. Yes, and we've just been working on our assessment calendar for next year, and we are indeed doing 3 rounds of map testing. And I believe the window closes at the end of January. There might need to be some flexibility. I can come back with some proposed dates to bring that information to be included in your action steps. Or on the overall board, those standing board reports, I can edit or add it into there.
Yeah, I thank you, Peggy. I see that October we'd have, I'm just thinking out loud, we'd have the state assessment info by then. It just seems like it's a long stretch between October and March if we do the map testing in maybe I'm just being too picky. I don't know how other board members feel. Just seems like maybe we should throw another month in there for an update.
I thought I saw in one of the documents that there's a monthly report out in some format to the board where we're sharing information about student achievement that's built into the monthly report calendar.
Okay, I'm wondering why this is this too redundant then? Number 1?
No, because I think my point of view is that if they're done in January and February with the MAP testing, I don't want them to rush in February and just say, here are our scores. I want admin to have time to digest them and really internalize them, have time to talk about successes, areas of opportunity, and then come with a plan. And there is, so I think this one specifically, and again, this is how I interpret these goals differently, is that this one is specifically about like the MAP test, the forward exam, whereas the other one could be focused on a smaller piece, perhaps like a certain subgroup or something that doesn't necessarily fall into that category. It could be something on a specific program in the district and how that program is achieving. And so in my mind, that's the difference between the two, if that makes sense to everybody else. And if that's how everybody else kind of sees it, interprets it also.
I don't know. Yeah, what do others think?
Yeah, so I think...
I like the way,
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I like the way it's written because even though we will get monthly updates from the superintendent, I like that it specifies about subpopulations and that we can know if we get a broad view monthly that we can look forward to these specific reports that break out student achievement by subpopulations. And I think that's important.
And I agree. I'm just wondering if then we wouldn't need just one more report then from the superintendent added in there, because it's a long spell between October and March, especially with those subgroups. I'm just wondering if we should add like February.
With the COVID...
Next March, so that's not going to work. Okay, yeah, I'm good.
Okay, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, with the COVID-19 situation, is DPI making any adjustments in light of the MAPS testing not taking place?
Yeah, MAPS is a local, but definitely DPI is making adjustments. We haven't received yet, but they just said they are looking at all the state-required assessments and what that will look like as far as report cards, what will come out this year. Yep. They just haven't shared it with districts yet.
And so this may be a goal that has to change because we don't have a forward exam, right, to really review data on. It's kind of lumped in there with state. And did all the ACT get taken before this happened, or? Okay.
Peg, I don't know if you can answer the question on the ACT. I think that there were some allowances made for people to still take those. Do you know?
The initial dates were held prior to the closure. Now, I'd have to look at the window again to see if the whole time for students with extended time and the makeup dates, I'd have to look on that. That would be about the only data that we would have as far as state reporting. There were arrangements for students to take, if you're a senior and wanted to retake, that weren't necessarily through the schools or through the state assessment system.
And in the past, if something happened with a goal that it wasn't applicable, we would NA it. It wouldn't count negatively because, as I'm reading this, there are some pieces of this that we can't necessarily do because of COVID, and they're out of our control. And so I don't think we would hold ourselves negatively for that. We wouldn't penalize ourselves, but we would just say we weren't able to do that this year due to the pandemic and due to school closure. But I think it's good wording to keep us focused as a board, as well as for future boards to have this wording available. Any other questions or comments?
We do have a motion and a second. I almost forgot. So we have a motion and a second to adopt the 2020-2021 board goals. Are there any other questions or discussions? Okay, hang on one second. Stephanie and Megan, you went away on the screen. Are you guys all able to hear us still?
No, I don't know why I went away. You guys are all here and I can hear you fine.
Okay, good, because you're not on the screen, so I just want to make sure that means you guys weren't disconnected.
I'm okay.
Okay,
Thanks for checking.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor of approving and adopting the 2020-2021 board goals as amended today, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the board goals are adopted as amended today. Great work, everyone. Okay, brings us to Michelle will give us a little board docs tutorial. So Michelle, whenever you're ready, can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so I'm just going to make my screen a little bit larger. And I know for the most part, the board is very familiar with board docs, and the view that the board has when you're logged in is slightly different than what the public has, only because the board has a few more features than what the general public has. Other than that, the way that you use board docs and maneuver through board docs is actually very, very similar. When you first log into board docs, this is the home screen that you will see. It's also called the featured page. If you have questions, just kind of jump in as I go, because I'd rather try to address them as I'm going. So the first thing that I did was I changed.
I'm sorry, sorry, could you share your screen so all of us remoting in can see what you see?
I can try,
I think it's
sure.
I'm sorry to ask, and you're just getting started. There's like a present now in the bottom right.
Except that I'm not on, I'll try that. I'll have to get into the meeting like you guys are. And it might cause feedback, so hang on.
Hey, Megan, I have YouTube pulled up, so I'm watching it live, and I just muted it. That might be quicker.
Oh, yeah, then Michelle, yeah, I'll just do that. Michelle, I'm sorry.
Okay,
sorry to
try
interrupt.
that. Make sure you mute everything before you, or as fast as you can so you don't get feedback. Oh. Can you do that too, Stephanie?
Yeah, I'm working on it right now.
Okay. All right. So when you first log in, you'll get to the featured page. And I did change the picture in the upper left-hand corner so that it does have both the vision and the mission statement, as well as where typically the meetings are held. That's the part that I added, and I changed the background so that it wasn't just plain gray. And then below that, we have kind of the standard welcome for the district and the school board. And then below that is the list of all of the board members. If members or people want to see that, you can click on one of the members and it gives a little bit more information. And then I think if I back up here, well, if I go over to the left-hand side, like for Stephanie's, I have your picture in there, but I can add everybody else's picture now that we have them updated on the regular board website. So then everybody would be able to click on each person and be able to see that. And then I can also add in name, addresses and phone numbers and stuff here as well, so that it's also on here as well as the regular board website under our regular district website, BeloitSchools.net. If I click back on featured at the top right-hand part of the big thick gray bar. That's kind of like your navigational bar, this big thick gray bar up here. Above that is like a home button, which is supposed to take you back to our district homepage, and the search bar. And then this little icon is like your person when you're logged in. So for me, if I click down on it, you can see my name, and then it has my contact info. I can change my password, I can log out, and then I have additional features because of my capacity on Board Docs. And then if we had multiple, if we had different, the more expensive Board Docs option that lets you break down, so we would have not just Board of Education, but we would have each of our committees separately. We could have all of our ad hoc committees separate, different things like that. If we had lots of committees, some school districts have multiple boards and things like that in very large cities, or where they have ones that combine and become like the consolidations. They'll have, under this tab that I have open, you'll see a drop-down list, and some of those really large ones are like in Texas or Ohio, places like that. We just have the one, which is Board of Education. If you click on the Meetings tab, it will always take you to the most current meetings. If you click on the little down caret, you can choose between active and draft. And then because I have the capability of creating templates, and then I also have my agenda items. I believe as board members, you should all be able to create my agenda items, as well as like the superintendent and the cabinet members can all do that as well. Any of our administrators that use Board Docs also have that feature. The My Agenda Items allows you to create an agenda item to put it on an agenda. If you click on draft agendas, then you could see any agendas that
Michelle,
are...
can I interject with a question?
Sure.
So if I create an agenda item, is there an approval process? So is that like pending until like the chair or board president or someone comes in and approves that?
Correct.
How does that work?
So typically the way it works, and I haven't tested it a whole lot with board members, but in the regular setting, if I have somebody who creates an agenda item, they have to then choose from an approval tree, and the approval tree, depending on who is inputting it. So let's just use an example that let's say that Wendy LaPointe, who does the financial reports in the finance business office, she creates the report for the finance reports that are coming to the oversight committee. She will go in and put that report in along with all of the attachments. She then has to choose the correct approval tree, which will then send that report on to Joanne Armstrong, who is the executive director, who then gets an email that says, you have this approval out there. She'll go out and look at it, make sure it meets, that it's correct, that it's going to the right meeting, that it says what it should say, and then she will hit an approval, which looks like a little airplane, and sends it on, and then it moves to the superintendent, who then approves it and says, yep, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is the meeting that it's going to, and then she or he would approve it, and then it moves on to that agenda. So it's out on that agenda as a draft, but in my side of things, I can see that it's going through that like chain of command, waiting for those approvals. For board members, really the only board member that has kind of done their own reports right now is that for some of these retreats and stuff, Kyle has done a few, and his don't typically need approval, but that might be how he's been set up as the board president. So we'd kind of have to test it with a board member. We might have to create an approval tree to get those reports to go through an approval process so that the committee chair is approving it, or that if it's going to a regular board meeting, that the board president is approving it, or that the board president and the superintendent are approving it, since those agendas are done per policy by both people.
Perfect. So I'm all about working smarter. So instead of me emailing you for like Oversight and Finance Committee, I'll just use this tool. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had one quick question. On when I go to the little drop down for meetings, I only have active and draft for my account.
Okay, I can look into that, and you're sure you're logged in then, right? You'd have to be logged in to be able to see drafts, so we can look at that. It might be the way things are set up, and it might be that unless you're considered a particular type of user, you may not be able to add board, you might not be able to add your own reports, because typically board members aren't doing that. Typically, people in the district are creating those reports and putting them out there for the board then to see and work with at the meeting. So 90% of the time, 98% of the time, it's somebody from one of our departments, like the example I gave, or it's me doing it. So it's not very typical for a board member to be putting on their own board report. You know, like I said, Kyle's done a few because of the board retreat, but it's not very typical for a board member to be doing their own board report. A lot of times it's because you don't have the attachments and the information or the data to attach to it. So that's why a lot of times I end up doing the board reports for the board members, but it's something we could look into and see.
Well, wasn't there a way to create an agenda item, like in the drop down?
In the meetings drop down?
Yeah, so my agenda items, is that where we would submit?
That's where an agenda item report would be written,
Okay.
yes. But like I said, I'm not 100% sure that board members have that ability. I do because of the way I use board docs. Like, you know, on the public view, you wouldn't even see the draft or the templates or the My Agenda items, because the public is just looking at the active meetings. So they don't, all they'd have is the meetings tab, and they click on it and it goes right to the meetings. Okay? So if I go back to like an active meeting, and I'm going to open up the 2020 meetings on the left-hand side in the gray bar over here. If I open that up, and let's just go back to let's pick the regular board meeting of April 7th. And I click on that. So you can see that here's like the heading. This is the heading that comes out on the agenda for everybody to see. And then you can view the agenda by clicking there. And then down the left-hand side of the page over here is where all of the agenda items are. And you can see each gray bar represents like a section of the agenda. So we have like our meeting opening section, then we have the public comment time, the reports to the board, and then we have the consent agenda. And if we scroll down, then you can see any items that are requiring board discussion or action. And then the meeting closing. If we had closed session, you would see that executive session section. And then in looking at these items, obviously the meeting opening are the typical ones. And then as you come down, if you look at the consent agenda, you can tell there's an attachment because of the little piece of papers that are down here on the side. The one thing that sometimes can be confusing for people is down here under item 5, requiring board discussion, the approval of the minutes. This makes it look like there's no minutes attached. However, when you click on that, the minutes are here within the body of it, and you click on here to view the minutes. And then it pulls up the minutes because they're embedded right in board docs. So they're not something that I have to like type up and physically attach like I did with the policies that were the little papers behind each item. Does that make sense? And then if I click back on the word meetings again up here in the gray bar, what it's showing you then is that same view with what is on the heading of the agenda. And I had clicked here on view the agenda. You can also click here to print the agenda. And there are several ways to print the agenda if you want to. You can print a simple agenda, which is basically what I give you when you're here in person, so that you can just simply follow along, so that once you're into items, you don't have to keep backing out just to look at the agenda. And so down here then in the lower right-hand corner is your print feature. You can also print a detailed agenda. And so I clicked on the tab that said detailed agenda, and you can see that it's giving you like the simplified version of the board report. So when you're on the left-hand side and you click into each item, you see the subject and the heading and the access that it has and the name and the purpose of that item. That's all kind of consolidated in this one little section here for the call to order. So this section right here is that one little board report consolidated. And then you have the next item here, which is the roll call, and that's in this section. And then the next section here is the approval of the agenda. And as I scroll down, you'll see then it goes to the second section, and it just keeps going all the way down. Now, if you chose to print this, and you can see here this gray box shows the file attachments. But if you chose to print this, the way we have it currently set up is each one of those items will print on a separate piece of paper. It will not print the attachments. You have to go into each agenda item, unfortunately, and print each attachment separately. But it would print the agenda, each report, on a separate page for you if you had a need for that. Typically, we don't do that. I do that sometimes because when I'm in the feature that takes the minutes, I can't see all of this. So when I know that you might be making changes to a policy or something, it's easier if I have that printed out so I can just make hand notes on it quick. Because when I'm in the minutes feature, I would have to totally change screens to get to the actual policy. So I use that feature. I'll just close out of that, and it brings me right back to the same page. This add minutes is where I actually then go in and add the minutes. And then this edit video would be if we connected a video here for the meetings, which we've just talked about going in and figuring out how to connect our YouTube videos to each meeting, which could be a little bit cumbersome right now because of the way that they're being taped. Once things reopen and we're back to having our regular meetings and our televised meetings are being videoed, on YouTube individually, it'd be much easier to link them here, and people wouldn't have to necessarily go out and find them directly on YouTube. They should be able to click here and just go right to that meeting. So that's a feature that we're looking into using. If I go back up here to the gray bar and I've clicked on agenda, again, that takes you back into the detailed agenda on the left, and the actual reports then, as I click on different items, open up on the bigger part of the screen here. Any questions so far on that?
Michelle, can you explain the public, administrative, and executive content really quickly, please?
Yes, I can. So for the board and the administration and we have different levels of information that appear. So the public view shows all of the items from the agenda item details all the way down through the public content here, which is telling you what the item is and who it is presenting it, the purpose of it, the rationale, if there's a background, and the items that are attached. The administrative content and the executive content are for two other levels. Anything in administrative content, all of our administration can see, as well as the board. Anything in executive content, just the board can see. That's used when we're discussing something in closed session. So if we're doing expulsions or something that is a personnel item that is not open to the public yet, those items can be then put into that executive content area for the board. And then once those items are passed, they can be put back out into the public, or some things will always remain in the executive content, just depending on the nature of the item. We rarely put anything in the administrative content just because usually it's either something that's just for the board to see or it's something that anybody can see. I haven't really come across an opportunity where we would put something in administrative content and not just in the executive content. But I would imagine that there are some districts that do use that administrative content. I would imagine it's probably used more by the administrators who are writing the reports and such, so that maybe they're using it for their own notes or their own purposes. So maybe it's a way that they're presenting their items to the board when they actually present, so that they have their own notes available to them without having to necessarily have it on a separate piece of paper or a separate document. They can just embed it right into the board report, and then they can pull that up and work off of that while they're talking to the board. And the board can also see that, but it's not necessarily there for the public to see that they're using what I would call like a cheat sheet to help do their presentation. That's the best way I can describe that maybe somebody would use that field. Like I said, I've never seen it used, and we've never used it. And we only use executive content when it's something that falls under one of those few exemptions in the state law that says we can put it in executive content. Any questions there? Okay. And then I'm going to go back up to the gray bar again and over to policies. Our policies will be in the active section very soon. And then they will no longer be on the old website. They will just be here. And then the Prg Packages, which is the fourth one down, that is where we have purchased through WASB the Prg Packages, which is their policy resource guide, which you can also see is underneath that Prg Packages is the policy resource guide. So we'll be able to go into the policy resource guide and look up sample policies and use those sample policies. The Prg Packages are emails and references that the WASB sends out when there's legal changes, federal changes, state changes, that they're recommending that you update in your policies. They send those packages out so that we can very easily go to our policies and reference them. And then you can also see where the policies are draft and retired. So as I was saying when I was going through policies, from now on, if a policy is retired, you'll find it in this retired section when we start to ever retire a policy. And then the draft section is where you'll actually see now our draft policies when we're working on them for changes during the process of going to the Policy Personnel Committee and then going to the full board for first and second reading. So instead of me having to house it all on my computer and making all of those changes and then turning them into PDFs and uploading them and attaching them, they will be attached right through Board Docs, and they'll all be housed here on Board Docs, which should make things much easier. At least that's what I'm being told, and I'm hoping that it's true. And then I haven't explored WASB webinars yet, but I'm hoping that that is any of the webinars that we participate in. So I'm hoping that that's where we can house them. And I'm gathering that that would just be board access, since it is a feature that we pay for, and that that probably is not available to the public since we pay for those webinars. And then next to the policies is our library. And right now, from clicking on the very home page, featured page, the board members, that's what's showing. But if you click again on the down arrow next to it, we have a general library, which has all kinds of information in it, 99% of which is open to the public. There's a few items that are private to the board only. Doesn't mean the public couldn't ever receive it, but it is something that they would have to ask for, or it's copyright material that we have uploaded just for our board members because we pay for a subscription. And so we have to protect it because we've paid for the subscription and it's copyright material. Some of the other items that are in here are like financial reports and things. And just like you don't walk around with your checkbook open to the public, we don't typically open the board finances to the public other than what we put into our board packets on a routine basis. But there's some more detailed reports in here that we upload to the board. And if the public is interested in them, they can make an open records request for them. Otherwise, like I said, 99% of what's in here is open, and the public can certainly take a look at what we have in our library. We keep trying to build the library. A couple of things I'd like to point out to board members, because I'm not even sure how many of our current board members are aware of things that we've been putting out here. There are things that used to be in the purple packet that when we printed it were just naturally in the front part of the packet. And so the extended field trips are about halfway down in the list. And the extended field trips are something that go through an approval process in the district, but then after the superintendent signs off on them, they come to the board for information. And so we try to alert the board when we upload extended field trips so that you know that there's new ones uploaded in that section. Obviously, we haven't been uploading anything lately, but they are out here by year, so you can see the trips that the students have requested to go on with their advisors or with their teachers. Things like the jazz band going to New York, or the art club going to some art festival, or the DECA club goes to a competition or something. So the facility use are people who are wanting to use our buildings and making those requests. That was a report that used to show up in the front of the purple packet. So any of those that are still coming in go there. However, I believe that the committee at one time voted to end having those reports come to the board. The grant funding reports I usually still receive from the finance office, so those get uploaded here so you can see like where we're at with grants and what funding is still coming in, what grants we're still receiving, and which grants have ended. And then the thank you cards is the one at the bottom. And so one of the things that I have done through the superintendent's office for years is when we unfortunately lose a staff member or a board member or a former staff member or former board member, we send on behalf of the school district, Board of Education, superintendent and staff flowers to the funeral and stuff. And then when the families send thank you cards back, we put them here so that the board members can see that that thank you has come in. Sometimes we get thank you cards for other occasions as well that are sent to the board, and that correspondence goes there as well. So those are just some areas that you might want to periodically check and see if anything new has come in. It's not something that is uploaded on a daily basis or even a weekly basis. They're things that come periodically, and I do try to let you know when I send out the Friday email that says stuff has been uploaded for the next meeting, that we've also added something to the library. And that's kind of board docs in a quick nutshell. I mean, if people really want to know more about it, I'm happy to go over more with you or meet one-on-one or answer any other questions that you have, but those are just some of the basics of how you can maneuver and use board docs. Obviously, when you're in individual items, there's ways to print those individual pages and items as well. If you click on attachments and they download or they open in a separate tab, you can print those as well. So it has quite a bit that it's capable of doing.
Can you show how to search for something,
Absolutely.
Which sold me on board docs the first time they came and showed us, because I don't know, the website was a bugger to find anything on.
Yes, I totally agree. That is one of the greatest features of board docs is the search. So I just did that kind of quickly, so I'll back up. So if you can be on any page to access the search bar, but I'm on the featured page, and up in this little thin black bar up by the little person that identifies it's you, next to that is the magnifying glass, and that's the search. And so you can click on the search. You can search everything at once, which will include meetings, policies, the library, minutes, and any attachments. Or you can uncheck things. So say you know it's not a policy, you know it's not in the library, that it happened at a meeting, and you know it did not have an attachment. And so you could search. You got a topic, Kyle, that we know is not got an attachment that... Can you think of something? put you on the spot. Let's try summer school.
Yeah, we could try that.
So then you type in summer school and you can see the double arrows were spinning. And so it comes up and it's telling you that this is an agenda item and it was Tuesday, April 23rd of 19. And the item was summer school offerings. Here's another item that has to do with transportation, and it probably was the policy was being updated back in December and it had to do with transportation for summer school students. Here was one on February 25th of 2020, and that was for summer school for 2020. Here was the early college credit program applications, and that was for the summer program. So depending on what it is that you wanted to see, this only looked at meeting agendas and meeting minutes. So let's just say that you wanted to look at the February 25th one because you wanted to see what was going to be done for summer school in 2020. So you can go to this picture of this agenda item and say, yes, that's what I was looking for. And if you click on it, this box opens. You can see what the board report was and who was giving it. And if you say, yes, that's exactly what I want, you can either close it and actually go to that current meeting then by going through meetings and the 2020 tabs and choosing the February 25th meeting, or you can even faster click navigate there and it will take you to that meeting and to that exact location where that item was. And then you can see, yes, there was an attachment. You thought maybe there wasn't, but yes, there was indeed an attachment, and you could click on that attachment, open it up and look at it. You can even see how the vote and motion went for that night on that particular item. So that search bar can be a really good feature. The other thing that it can do, so I just clicked on the search feature again, and it took me right back to the search that I was in case when I looked that wasn't what I needed, I could go back and check through these other ones, and you can just scroll down and see how many came up. You can add words, so I could say summer school plus 2019, and that should narrow my search down. Actually, that's saying 0 found, so let's try summer school 2019. And now it's found the summer school 2019 stuff and put it first for the most part. There's a few 2020s in there because it does also match the summer school. Sometimes if you put the 2019 before summer school, it will do a better job of putting those items first, and you don't have to search through as much. Another nice thing that we can do as a district is if we choose, we can click on this tab here called Meta, and that's the metadata. And the metadata allows you to go out and search all the other users for board docs. So if you wanted to compare one of our policies, say, about summer school, take off 2019, with summer school policies in other districts, now you can look up and see what other districts are doing either for their summer school program or for their policies. So if you wanted policy specifically, I would probably add the word policy behind it and see if they have a specific summer school policy. And it will pull up from all the other districts that use board docs so that you can do those kinds of searches as well. So you don't have to just look at the WASB. This one will look across the country. So anybody anywhere in the United States that's using board docs, it will pull up their policies or their practices or their meetings or their minutes or their agenda items for you to look at, compare, get ideas from.
Michelle, I know the public can use the search feature, and it does the same thing. Are they also able to use that meta feature that's only for?
They are not allowed,
Okay.
They are not able to access the meta feature, just those of us that actually log into board docs can use the meta feature. The public can only search our board docs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I mean, I'll say this is probably the biggest feature that drew me to board docs was just the ease of being able to search of everything. Now, I will say the transfer to board docs has been a little more tumultuous than anticipated or expected, with the intention that everything will be easier to find and maneuver. Any other questions about board docs, or Michelle, is there anything else?
No, just that, like any system, it's only as good as the data that we put in it, which is why policy has kind of been a thorn in our side. The policy is only as good as you put in it, and we didn't ever stop doing policy, so trying to make sure that every policy that's in board docs is done and accurate and uploaded, and I'm finding that there were a lot of policies that didn't cross over very well. Some were missing, so I've had to go back and find them and actually input them myself, and that's kind of why policy has become kind of the sore spot
Yeah, but also
of board docs,
yeah.
because there were just things that didn't quite match, and it only goes back to when we first started using it. There was no way that we entered the old stuff in.
Right.
That would take way too long to do, and so we'll always have to go back to the old part of the website.
Right, because that whole,
So-
like prior to November 2018 is on the old website. The purple packets and everything are there.
Right.
But then also with policies, once the policies are live, we will actually edit them right into board docs, and then as soon as the board approves them, they will be flipped over, so there won't be anything on that back end.
Correct.
Other than ensuring that they were updated.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
I have,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead, Amy.
Michelle, this
Yes.
was really helpful, and every time I've reached out to you with a question about board docs, you've always gotten back quickly with really useful information, so I appreciate that. The only question that I have is that the glitch that was preventing us from posting our minutes immediately after they were approved, has that been resolved?
Yes, I believe it was just a one-time glitch in the way that I had set up that particular meeting and that particular consent list. And unfortunately, it had about 10 or 12 sets of minutes on it to try to catch up on minutes. And so unfortunately, that was quite a few minutes that didn't release the way they should have. But I've checked the last few sets of minutes that were approved like over the last couple of weeks, and I've gone back and looked, and they have all released appropriately. So I believe it was something in the way that I had set up that meeting that when I looked into it after it was brought to my attention, that the minutes weren't releasing. And then it was also the fact that for a while we had said we were going to do, approvals at the same meeting, and we were having so many special board meetings so quickly that I wasn't keeping up with those. And so I'm pretty well caught up with them, and we'll be following that. It was interesting in redoing the 100 series policies and getting those ready for you. I did find where our policy actually says that all board minutes will be approved at the business meeting, which is our typical fourth Tuesday televised meeting, and not at the meetings, but whatever the board wants to do for approval to make it faster, easier, and more accessible is fine with me. It's not that hard to do, but at the same time, it was the nature of how often we were meeting and how many sets of minutes we were doing that was making it difficult to keep up. And then the one glitch put me behind by 12 sets of minutes I didn't even realize hadn't released. So we should be beyond all of that, and they should be much better. So if somebody's seeing that they're not releasing, I just need to know that.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, and then one more thing. So when we're all back here in person, Michelle has her screen up like this, and ideally this is how the screen will always look. And Board Docs does also have the feature where we can vote right into Board Docs. I love them to dearly, but there were some board members who struggled with that a little bit, so we stopped doing it. But the really nice thing is then it recorded the vote for Michelle, so it wasn't anything that she had to actively keep track of who voted in favor of. And then the results pop up right down there. So when it's shared on TV, the people who are watching at home can see the results of the vote, who voted what way. And so I think that is something we'd like to try to go back to, because I get the sense we're pretty tech savvy group of people. Okay. Anything else about board docs? Okay. All right, so moving on to F, information requests and chain of command. So Sue is going to take over this part for us.
Okay, and this is really best practice for chain of communication. The general practice is that questions and requests for information, reports, and updates typically go from individual board members to the president of the board, and the president takes those to the superintendent. The board president and the superintendent discuss the question or request and determine how to proceed. And they consider if this is something that can be done at that time, in what manner. The superintendent then determines who would respond to the request, who would gather information, who would provide any type of report, and who would share the information and how at a formal board meeting or in a report. There's also the opportunity for board members to meet individually with the superintendent. And Michelle had developed a sign-up sheet. I think we've got 4 on the calendar for next week. These are typically about a 1-hour meeting. And right now we can do them in person or virtually. And so there's still some openings for this upcoming week. General structure for one-to-one meetings is that it's a time for informal discussions. It's an opportunity to strengthen the working relationships between the board members and the superintendent. It's a time to provide some specific feedback on the progress in the school district. This could be a general discussion about distance learning, communication, staffing, other items. It's a time to share one's personal interests for the work of the district. It's a time to share ideas, issues, concerns that might be coming from the community that the superintendent might not be aware of. It's a time to share personal perspective on issues, ask for clarification, or to provide some background information on an issue.
So I have a question if, for example, Spencer is looking over the agenda and the attachments and everything for Tuesday's meeting and he has questions, do you then want him to email the board president, or can he, and then I will email? Okay.
Probably that is the best approach to take. You may have the answer and could easily give it to one of your board members. If it means that, whoops, we've missed something, then we've got to have another conversation to make sure information is clearer, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then the other piece that kind of goes with this is that then any information or clarification I get from the superintendent, then I will share it with the whole board, because no one board member should have more information walking into a meeting than everyone else. And then also that might, if I receive a question I'm going to forward on, I'll also let the board know, because then I won't be getting maybe 5 emails about that same question, kind of a thing. So it's about efficiency and respect to like inboxes and everything like that. Okay. Anything else, Sue?
Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, Sue. So when we did our board retreat earlier this past fall, one of the efficiency things that was brought up, also to respect everybody's time, was like, if we get the agenda posted, we're supposed to take the weekend to look it over, and then if we have a question, we're supposed to email, kind of what Kyle just said. So is that how you, so for example, if I wanted more information on a report that hold on, kiddo, I don't know, I think he's outside. Sorry, if I wanted more information on something Missy had in a report, would I then email Kyle to email you to email Missy, or something, just so we could take care of that and not kind of put administrators on the spot during meetings? Or how would you like that to proceed?
Yeah, and I would agree. It is following that chain of communication. If you have that kind of question or specific request for deeper information, first through Kyle, back to me.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yep, thank you.
And Sue, I love what you kind of talked about with individual board member meetings. So I don't know if maybe that could be typed up and made nice and leave it with us for future use. Thank you so much. Any other questions about chain of command or information requests? All right. So this brings us to another
Oh,
activity.
Kyle,
Oh, yeah.
I do have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Okay. And I don't know how we should package this, but I just get the sense that people want to go to the right person. I don't think people are trying to be, in most cases, disrespectful by, oh, I'm going to call such and such. If we could, and this doesn't have to happen immediately, but inform the public, like specifically, these are the boundaries for the board, these are the boundaries for the superintendent. If you have certain questions, this is the appropriate chain of command. And if you're not getting a response, then this is the next step. I think if that's clearly laid out to people, that could resolve some concerns or issues.
I agree. There's some of those policies due to changes in laws have to be updated. And so with that update, then we can update that chain of command and everything else. So thanks, Amy. Anything else? Okay.
So this brings us to our community leadership activity, which is also found in our book, but I don't want you to look yet. And this is going to be a partner activity. So Stephanie, I'm going to call you. You're going to be my partner. Amy, I'm going to give Sue your phone number, and she will call you. And Spencer and John, you are going to work together. And, oh, Megan, hang on. I didn't share it with you. I shared with the people, with Amy, the cabinet, and Stephanie, the list. Okay, so that you can see them. And so this is going to be like a sort. So these are roles and responsibilities. And you're going to work with your partner, and you're going to sort them into 3 categories. Something that the school board is responsible for, or one of their roles and responsibilities, and then the superintendent, or whether or not they're both responsible for that. And the numbers, I will say, have no meaning other than to help us identify which one we're talking about. It's like a clarification point. I tried to scramble them up. And I'm going to pass, I have paper copies I'm going to pass out to people here. So just bear with me a minute. And some of them are really obvious the way the wording is as to which group it goes to. So we'll work as partners, sort them into superintendent, both, or the board, and then we'll come back together and I have bigger ones, we'll sort them together. Sure. I think like 10 minutes, 11:30 should be sufficient. Thank you. Stephanie, hang on, I'll call you in a minute. Okay, everyone, it's 11:35. Are we ready to continue?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. So I think to make it easier for people at home, we'll go kind of down in order and talk about where we think each one goes as a group. So number one is ensures a climate of open communication, both internally and externally. And is that falling to the superintendent, the school board, or both?
Both.
Okay, here's some boths. Yeah, yep, go ahead. Anybody at home want to throw in an idea?
Both.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like it's both. The book does say that, and this is kind of like a pre-test, so we'll read after, continuing professional development, we'll read the chapter. But this, the book says that this is actually the role of the superintendent. Okay. All right. Number 2 follows a collaborative approach in working with the board.
I said both.
Okay.
Superintendent.
I hear both. Superintendent. Okay. Yeah, some of them are worded because they're superintendent. And then some of them have similar themes that are worded more for the board. But the book says that this is the superintendent because of the work with the board and that collaborative teamwork. I'll reveal the page number once we're done.
Got it.
And number 3 is assist. Oh, now you guys found my system. Assist the board in its advocacy efforts with public officials by arranging meetings, providing needed data and information, and scheduling other activities as needed. I hear superintendent.
Superintendent.
Okay, superintendent.
Hey, Kyle, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
When Sue and I were discussing number 3, the thing that jumped out with me, it was like one of our goals is to meet with city council. So the superintendent would arrange that meeting.
Megan is actually working on arranging that for us as our legislative representative. And that is something that we can discuss. I think the superintendent may help in any way that the board would need to accomplish that goal, is how I interpret it to mean.
Yeah, Megan
No,
and
and
I.
that makes sense to me. That's why number 3 kind of surprised me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Megan and I discussed that too, that because the word on front of that is assist. So it's not necessarily that the superintendent would do it, but she would assist.
It probably should be something that more is stated as collaborating. Yeah, depending on the situation. We had a lot of meetings with like city officials during this emergency time. And between, the superintendent's office and the board president and the vice president as well, we did a lot of who's going to make this call kind of thing and setting things up.
Number 4, I'm not going to pick them up until I'm ready to move them because people can see the back. Implements changes recommended through the periodic review. And this one was kind of a tricky one because the periodic review is mentioned at a later one.
I said
Superintendent?
superintendent. I was with Kyle, who knows the answers, so I was at a distinct disadvantage, I feel.
Sue and I discussed this as well, and it depends on what the change is. Like if it's
Right.
a change to a board norm, then the board would do that. But if it's a change to like a practice within the district, since the superintendent and their staff is in charge of implementation, the superintendent would handle that.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. So the book said it was the superintendent, but again, you're right, Amy. It depends on what that item is, whether it's something that would happen at the board level or happen at the superintendent level, more district. So now this is number 5. Ensures a climate of open communication at board meetings and throughout the district. I hear both. Both? Okay.
Both.
And that is true. That is a responsibility of both the board and the superintendent. Number 6, advocates student achievement as a top community priority.
Both.
Both. And that is a responsibility of both. Okay. Advocates district positions on educational issues with legislators and other state and local political leaders and keeps abreast of other state and national issues.
Did I say both, Kyle?
I think you did, Stephanie.
Yeah, both, I'd say.
Okay. Both. This one is, the book says it's a board. And I don't want anyone to think I'm overruling. We're kind of going with how the book puts it, and then we'll read to kind of figure that out. So I don't want anyone to take it that I'm like overruling, or some of them are open for interpretation. So the next one is models collaboration and trust. Both. That is a responsibility of both the superintendent and the school board. Okay. Approves and periodically reviews a district plan to build collaborative relationships with key stakeholders at all levels based on gaining support for student achievement as the district's top priority. Okay, here, board. Okay, superintendent. Anyone else want to chime in?
Kyle, I can't hear any of the other board members. They're not
Okay, I'm
listening
sorry.
anymore. Just an FYI,
I'm sorry. We
Sue
felt
and I
like.
had discussion about this because
Yeah.
it specifically says district plan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay. So does that mean, Amy, that you think it's the superintendent?
I have a question.
Sure.
So, like the board will approve our own short-term goals, which will eventually evolve into a strategic plan. But since this specifically says district plan, and I know the board has an evaluative role in the district's plan, but who approves the district plan? Is that the superintendent or is that the board?
That's the board. So the school board is it. So.
Okay.
So with the strategic planning process, it's different degrees, and as we start to explore this, we'll learn more about it. But that strategic plan is really a collaborative effort between administration and board members and all stakeholders to put together. But then it's the board who finally has to approve it at the end and say, yes, this is our strategic plan. This is our plan for the next 3 to 5 years. And so that's really that approves is really the key thing that moves into the board.
Cal, your audio is cutting in and out. Could you kind of confer to Dean to see if something different can happen?
Okay. Oh, this one doesn't have to stay plugged in. That one has a battery. Okay, let me try switching microphones.
Thank you.
Is that better? Can everybody? I feel a little more foolish with this one, but as long as everybody can hear me, that's what's important.
You feel like a host on Price is Right?
Yeah. I should hold it like this, maybe. Okay. The next one works with the board to determine a process for a periodic review of the leadership team's relationship and vision.
Superintendent.
Okay. Any other thoughts? That is the superintendent. Some of them are worded yet, obviously. Keeps the board and others informed about the district's progress and solicits appropriate input for ideas of concern.
Superintendent.
Okay. Superintendent. Don't forget to use your mic if you're in person, please, so everybody can hear. All right. Recommends to the board a plan to build these collaborative relationships, leads a periodic review of progress, and implements adopted strategies for improved relationships.
Superintendent.
Superintendent. Help the board identify key communicators within the district and recommend appropriate professional development to help them improve their skills.
Superintendent.
Superintendent. Okay. Fosters collaborative relationships as a board philosophy in strategic planning, community vision, and instructional improvements.
School board.
School board, any other thoughts?
School board.
School board. Okay. We have just a few more. Presents budget recommendations needed to support collaborative efforts and initiatives and keeps abreast of other state and national issues.
Superintendent.
Superintendent.
Okay, superintendent. That is the superintendent's responsibility, one of their roles. Okay. Recommends additional policies or policy revisions.
Board.
Board.
I would say both.
Both.
Yeah, and this is one I disagree with the book. It puts it under administration, and I'm going to put it there because that's what the book says, and we'll explore why. But I disagree because policy, so there's some, depending on our district, and how it, and depending on the policy. Oh my gosh. Okay. Encourages the board and staff to involve key stakeholders in appropriate decision-making both at the district and at the school level.
Both.
The way it's worded, I'd say superintendent.
Superintendent.
Okay. Yep, it's the superintendent. Oh no. Oh.
think you got it. Okay, nothing that doesn't happen any other day in a classroom. Provides funding and resources for collaborative efforts. Both?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Yeah, I think an argument can be made for both. The book says that is the school board. I think it's with their philosophy of the board aligning all the resources. Okay. Whoops. Yep. Okay. Teams with board members to speak to groups within the community.
Superintendent.
Superintendent. And the last one, provides data and relevant materials to assist the board in its advocacy role.
Superintendent.
Okay. The superintendent. All right. Okay, so this was an activity, it's on page, the list of roles and responsibilities are on page 44 in that same, the key work of school boards, and it's to summarize chapter 4 on community leadership. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts about this before we continue on? Okay. See none, we'll move on to item H, meeting efficiency and transparency. And so as we have gotten going, there are a few things I've been made aware of that I want to share with everyone and kind of talk a little about on some things. The first one is that the chat on Google Hangout does broadcast over YouTube. So as comments are being made, just so you're aware that that goes out on, that people watching at home can see it and it's being recorded. To go with YouTube, also, I know our meetings are really, it's challenging for stakeholders and community members to watch right now because it's like a 4-hour lump of time where you have to zoom in and find the meeting that you're looking for. And a part of that is because our meetings are pretty much running back to back. So I would ask that chairs, and myself included, that as you put agendas together with the superintendent, you kind of frame out that time. Right now, Dean doesn't have enough time to shut the recording down and start it up in between our meetings, but if we can work together and schedule the meetings, then we would have that time so that a YouTube video would only be like the oversight committee. Another video would only be the policy and personnel committee, so then that'd be easier to navigate. Also, there's a lot of learning happening and a lot of good discussion, but making sure that we all stay on topic. Again, we're such a young board, and so we ask questions, which is absolutely fine, and sometimes the questions can lead us down a path that's not the agenda item. And again, that comes to efficiency and time. It can also lead to a violation of like open meeting laws, because then the discussion turns into something that wasn't posted as the agenda item. So as we talk about efficiency, people, I don't know that very many community members want to watch like a 4-hour long meeting. So if we stay on topic, keep the meetings running smoothly, then I think that will help people tune into and increase that desire to. And also, please don't be offended if someone reminds you that, or points out that maybe the conversation has gone off topic. And that can be anyone. It doesn't have to be the chair of the committee.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to make one comment that this last week, I think, was a little bit different than the norm because of the meeting schedules. Typically, I know our planning committee meetings on the first Tuesday of the month, so therefore it's not going to conflict. I mean, we had those 4 meetings, so that was way out of the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we go forward, I mean, just asking that we're all kind of aware and cognizant of these things going forward. One of the norms that we adopted is no surprises. And so one of the purposes of posting that meeting 5 days ahead of time is not only give the public the opportunity to look over the agenda items, the attachments, and ask questions, or provide input on those agenda items, but it's also that opportunity for us to review the material and ask questions ahead of time. And a common practice is that if you have a question on Saturday as you're looking through the packet, you would email me. I would forward it to Sue or the superintendent, and then I would get that response and share it with everyone. That doesn't mean that you can't ask that question again on Tuesday or at the meeting. It just means then that the administration will be prepared to answer that question for you. So I don't want this to be perceived as like a way to circumvent that questioning in public. But we do ultimately have to make a decision in most cases, and we want to make sure that you have all the information that you need to be comfortable. You don't want an administrator to come here and ask for an approval. You ask a question, they don't necessarily know the answer, don't have it right away, and then you say, well, I don't feel like I can act on this right now because I don't have that information. So in order to keep things moving closely, and when I ask for information and clarifications, I always say, I'm going to ask you again on Tuesday on camera, but this is just so you know what I'm going to be asking. And if you can get the information to me ahead of time, great. And a lot of times, administrators will take those questions and incorporate into their presentation then on the board, so they'll provide the information. So does that piece make sense?
Kyle,
Kyle, I have a question.
John first, Amy, and then I'll come to you, okay?
I was just going to say that's a great practice.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great practice and I think it builds a higher level of trust between administration and the board because we respect what they're doing. We're not trying to, set unreasonable expectations for them when they're up presenting with material to say they should have all the answers right then. It's saying, hey, I'm going to ask this question, give me the information so I can make an informed decision. And if I have a question, others probably have it as well. So,
go ahead, Amy.
I completely agree to ask questions in advance as much as possible, and I think it's great to restate them just for the point of having on the record at the meeting. With the chain of information, so we submit our request to you and you pass it on to the superintendent, and it could stop there or go to someone else who would be more appropriate to answer it. But let's say a question is asked in the meeting and that person, let's say it's Melissa, gets that information. Does that need to go through Sue to you to come back to us, or can they say, hey, this is the information you asked for, or does that need to be held until the next public meeting? How does that work? And then I have 2 other questions. The first one is, how much time does Dean need to turn over meetings? And if we are in a situation where Dean does not have the time needed, can we put in the description on YouTube just kind of a timestamp of, if you're looking for this meeting, go to this time?
Dean needs 25 minutes in between meetings to shut one meeting down and prepare the next one and start it up. And I think that's a great idea, Amy, about putting in like the comment or something saying, this meeting begins at this time. And then the first question about the chain of command, So I think that it would kind of go back up to, it would be Sue's discretion, I think, if she wants to send it out or if she were to, I'll let her finish that.
I'm trying to understand the question too. Amy, so if somebody's giving a presentation and you have questions, just to clarify or better understand at the time of a presentation, is that what you're asking?
So let me restate it. So if someone is giving a presentation and I have a question that I didn't think of in time to submit earlier, and they need time, which makes sense, to get the accurate information back to me, can that come to me and copy everyone on the board so we have the same information, or does that need to go through you to Kyle to us?
So just clarifying, so like if the example you used, if you asked Missy a question about the presentation, it wasn't something that you need to know right away to make that decision, but something of interest or to clarify, then Missy would have to email you, you would have to email me, and then I would share it out to the rest of the board. Yeah. Sue says that is what would happen. That you know, it would Missy would share it with Sue, Sue would share it with me, and then I would share it with the board.
Is it appropriate when Missy gets, thank you, Missy, for letting me use you. When Missy gets back to me, can everyone just be CC'd so there's not 6 different emails? Is that, I don't want to violate any communication.
If it's in emails, as long as there's no expectation that there would be any response to what's being stated. And sometimes people will write, this is information sharing only.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Kyle, would the same thing apply if I had a question on Saturday? I'm looking over the material. I email you, you email Missy, or Sue emails Missy, and then it goes back that same channel?
Yep, that's how that would be correct. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of following a proper chain of command, and I think it's very important to just stay consistent to it. So, you know, pretty much everything to apply the same way. It would be good.
And from my point of view too, like if Maria had a question about an agenda item and she emailed me, she could send it to the entire board. So then, as long as people don't chime in, so then the board knows that that question has been asked, and then they can know that they're going to then be receiving a response to that question. Okay. Anything else? Okay. That brings us to the creation of short-term goals. And it's just a little afternoon. Michelle, I shared that spreadsheet with you. I shared it with the entire board so everyone can look up. I'm going to move those easels out of the way really quickly. Okay, and this document is not pretty by any means. So what it did is, after the Google form, it just dumps into a spreadsheet. So B is like the first one under board governance. C is under staff, so anything that would have to pertain to staff and personnel. D is the student achievement and equity, so anything under that category. Finance is column E, and facilities is column F, and then communication is G. And so kind of spread it out because then like each row is one respondent. What I did is if I received suggestions outside of that Google form, I put them down at the bottom. And then I also added down at the bottom the ones that I had notes from last Thursday when we had talked about our board goals. And there's a lot of great ideas and suggestions. And after looking over them, I know that there is a strong sense of urgency to create short-term goals that we'd work on over the summer. But kind of as I'm looking over the goals that were submitted, and I'm wondering if we as a board have the knowledge to proceed on our own, or whether or not it would be beneficial to see if WASB has someone who could help facilitate this in the near future. So this document, everyone should have access to this. So those are my thoughts. But again, this isn't my process. It's not my list of short-term goals. It's a board decision. But I personally would see benefit in having someone help facilitate this with us. Any thoughts?
Just for clarification, do you want assistance in creating the list or assistance in executing the list, or both?
It's a two-part process. Assistance in helping bring understanding of the process to the full board of creating those goals. Again, it could be a part of that could absolutely be then how do we monitor those in the creation of the goals, making sure they are SMART goals, making sure they have all of those components that we need to execute them and to be a good, viable plan for the short term. And then also to help the board kind of see, we've adopted board goals, then how do these goals fit into those board goals? Where is the place for these short-term goals? Because then we'll have, with an interim superintendent, we'll also have that person will be creating goals for themselves that align with the board goals and these short-term district goals. So I think a facilitator might help us put all those pieces together to make sure that we can align them as best as we can. And I'm not saying wait until we hire an interim superintendent to work on it. So it is a little bit both. That's a long answer to your question, Amy, but making sure that those goals are SMART goals, and then to see how this set of goals fits into the district and with our other goals.
And just for clarification, you went out on my end a little bit. So would we do this process twice? Because let's say we get an interim superintendent that starts July 1. Would we begin our process theoretically with someone from WASB to form and start to execute on our goals, and then do like a part 2, so a repeat process with the new interim superintendent with his or her goals?
Yeah, that is kind of what would have to happen, and I'll come back to you, John, is that because we're working with a cabinet, we're not in a vacuum of administration in creating these short-term district goals. But then the superintendent or the interim superintendent would also have their own goals, which then typically are used as a part of that evaluation process. So a facilitator could help us work on these short-term district goals, and then and then usually the interim superintendent would create their own goals and bring them to the board and say, these are the goals I'm working on, these are how they align. And then we usually give like a stamp of approval saying, yes, that's fine, because that they usually feed into the evaluation of that person. And so then it's a piece that has to be mutually agreed upon between the board and the superintendent or interim superintendent as their evaluation piece. So step one would be working on the short-term district goals. And then when we do hire an interim superintendent, we would discuss then if we need to do a part 2 with this facilitator, or whether or not the interim superintendent was able to create their own goals and have them feed in. Okay. John?
I personally like the idea of having a third-party facilitator. I think it takes it out of our hands and allows us to think a little bit more. And even with you, Kyle, I think not putting it onto your lap to say you need to do this, or any one of us, I think there's value to that. I like the approach that you just mentioned, that my concern is that until the time, I don't want to be at a standstill with our district until we get an interim in. And that's, 2 months down the road, and that's a lot of time, especially under the COVID-19 situation. So I think that we need to continue to move on. I like the idea of having specific goals for the interim superintendent coming in, but I believe that, 2 months right now is a long time that it could be, or a month and a half, without any direction at all. So that's my opinion.
I also agree with that. I have actually worked with different facilitators, and it works great, and more so because, this is a board of, many people that have many different ideas, and I think it would work a lot better if we had a facilitator that can help us, put all those ideas together and have an actual plan, instead of relying into, the board president or the vice president, or, I think it's a great idea on that. And even taking that farther, I think it would help us a lot to get prepared when we actually start establishing our strategic plan, because that's going to be something even bigger that we would have to work on. And if we already have those basic, ideas and basic steps to take, it's going to help us to get that through in a faster way, because it's much needed.
Stephanie or Megan, do you have any thoughts about next steps?
Hey, this is Megan. So I may have missed this, but if we get a third-party facilitator, what is our deadline kind of to get this done?
There is a sense of urgency from the board to get this done. So I think I would ask Michelle to send another doodle, check availability dates for June. I know this is busy, especially with more dates coming for the interim search, but I think that this is an equally important thing that we need to accomplish together. And if we were able to do another Saturday, I feel awful for all of, we all work so hard during the week, and then to give, another morning like this, or another 4 hours over the weekend. But I think start looking at dates in June, because I don't believe that we could get a turnaround for May.
Can I ask another question? And I agree that there's definite urgency here, and we want it to be done correctly. So what is the selection process? Who is going to be our third-party facilitator, and how do we choose this facilitator?
My first step was going to be just asking WASB whether or not they have someone who could help us with this. That would be the fastest step. And
then what kind of cost would be associated with that?
That's information I would get from them. So I would, if the board is okay with this, I would go ahead and contact WASB right away, and then bring it on Tuesday to the business meeting.
Okay, one more question, and then I'm good. Thank you so much for the explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Would this come out of our board budget then?
Yes, absolutely. It would come over our board budget.
Okay, thank you so much. That makes sense.
Okay. So I think I would prefer a motion to give me direction if we, something along the lines of postpone this.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm not opposed to having a facilitator, but it would be helpful for me if we are clear on what we're expecting a facilitator to bring that we are not capable of handling ourselves.
Sure. So right now, this is hard because I don't, sometimes being the president, I don't want to be in a position to make people feel like we're doing it wrong or incorrectly, or that I don't want to be in that position. This is a group of 7, and I also want to be able to participate more and not have that facilitator role during this discussion, and that's quite difficult sometimes. So also that knowledge then of how these goals, it seems a lot, it seems redundant, but there really is a place for all of these sets of goals, and they do all feed together and work together, and that facilitator would help build that understanding of how they do work in harmony, even though it can look confusing right now.
Is this totally out of line? Could Sue be our facilitator?
Okay,
Sorry, Amy.
I think, Stephanie, I could let Sue answer that for herself.
I guess just having been with the district for this period of time and having the history, I would want to be able to participate as well. And when you have that third party, they're kind of like a non-biased. They don't have that history piece, and they're just going to facilitate. But if it is someone from WASB, they also have the working knowledge of boards and school districts and what plans can look like, and can really help us understand how this plan of short-term goals is standing in place of a strategic plan for a short period of time. And I agree wholeheartedly that Kyle shouldn't facilitate because he needs to be able to participate and share his ideas as well. So I think that that uninvolved person, so that you can hear all of the voices. And I think that we would want each of the voices from the cabinet members as well.
Kyle, the only other point, thank you for your perspective and your honesty in how you want to step back so that you can participate. That makes complete sense. If we could be really specific about wanting the expectation that we want these short-term goals to roll into a strategic plan. I think that for me at least, that would be very helpful in the planning process of the short-term goals.
Absolutely. And I think a piece of this, because the short-term goals, as we kind of discussed them and approved in our board goals, is that we would have a list of short-term goals to be accomplished by September 1st. Then I think that we would have to, we can absolutely do a part 1, not knowing who that interim superintendent is going to be, and work on those lists for September 1. I think we would have to do a part 2 then with the interim superintendent to, like you said, Amy, kind of create a list of goals to carry us through that school year, to guide administration and as well as the board. And I think hopefully we would have more information about what that school year is going to look like. And it would be easier to create a plan based for that school year then rather than now, because there's so much unknown. And I absolutely, one of those goals that I had around in my mind for the 2021 school year would be at least the initiation of the strategic planning process. Yeah, so this is really in lieu of a strategic plan, very similar, but then again, this is something to kind of cover that gap between now and when a formal strategic plan is in place.
How much money do we have in our board budget? Does anyone know?
I can run those reports for you
Yeah.
and get those through Sue so that you know where you're standing at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. I'm just worried about the cost of a facilitator. I'm not opposed to it either. I'm just worried about the cost because with what we're walking into for the fall, it just concerns me with money. And I understand board money is separate. Or actually, here's a question for you, Joanne. How is board money allocated?
The board budget is part of the superintendent overarching. We have it broken out by department. So there's like the office of the superintendent, there's the board of education, there's the legal, all of that is rolled into the superintendent department budget. And so I'm going to be presenting an update on where we are, the budget with this COVID. That was a future agenda item that had been requested, and we've added that for the March 26th.
So can you cover a little bit more specifically the board budget on the 26th?
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay.
Thanks, Joanne.
All right.
Not a problem.
All right. And if that's okay, Sue. So I would feel comfortable with some sort of formal action along the lines of postponing this until at least we investigate the use of a third party. And like I said, I would reach out to WSB right away and then have something at the business meeting on the 26th. And then if it, and then we can make a decision from there.
I move to postponing the creation of short-term goals until we have more information, if we can get a third party involved.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to postpone the creation of short-term goals until we have more information and can investigate the use of a third party to help facilitate that. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, I don't see anybody unmuting and nothing in the boardroom. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. The motion carries. So we will postpone that, and like I said, I will get to work right away with WSB and bring something back hopefully on the 26th. So it brings us to J, continuing board professional development. I hope you've kind of enjoyed these activities, the couple of things that we've done today. And as we continue with mentor-mentee, I'm going to ask more for topics. But I'm kind of wondering how people feel like about a book study. We have this, the key work of school boards, which isn't a very long book. And we also have the handbook from WASB. So I was wondering if you're interested in starting those and maybe assigning a couple of chapters, like to be read every 2 weeks. So on the second and the fourth Tuesdays, rather than having a new meeting about it, it would be something, we would just have an agenda item talking about that assigned reading for that week or something. Or if anybody else has suggestions, I'm open to those also, because everybody has different learning styles, interests, and I want to be respectful of all of those.
Kyle, I
Yeah.
think that's a great idea. However, I would be in favor of waiting for a book study until we get through these next 2 months. We've got so much work to do with the interim, and I personally just want to concentrate on getting that done and the short-term goals. I'm not sure how everyone else feels.
Yeah, any other?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I was like super excited about like board book club, but I want to know how that's going to work on an agenda and how much time we expect it to take.
I mean, I think it would be, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes, kind of processing. I think, and again, in my mind, as I was thinking about how to approach this topic, kind of what we did with these here, what stood out in that reading, and then how does it apply to the school district of Beloit now or in the future? Or even how has it affected the school district of Beloit? And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So the idea of like putting it on as an agenda item and working it in regularly to board meetings rather than having to go through the work of posting a meeting, bringing Dean in to televise it, whether it's virtual or not. But that is up to you. These are reasons why I was thinking about doing it in that way. But again,
I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Like if we're gonna just spend a like prescribed, like kind of back to 9 hours ago when we were talking about meeting efficiency. I'm just kidding. If we're gonna stick within a prescribed set of time and we are like reporting out with purpose, like with just those 2 questions, like where each of us maybe get an opportunity to share out like what stood out to you, and then each of us get an opportunity to share out like how does this apply kind of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be totally awesome, and I will defer to the group in terms of whether or not we should wait to get that started, like Stephanie said.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Just a question for clarification.
Yeah.
I think the 2 things you have down to start with are really appropriate. Would we be able to recommend books after we are done with these 2 to continue the board book club? How will that work?
Yeah, okay. Well, I absolutely love the board book club, and I don't even think State Council has a book club, so I think that's a t-shirt coming soon to a board near us. And secondly, I absolutely think that if you've come across like an article or a book or something and you think it'd be beneficial for the board, absolutely you can have recommendations. I also think that recommendations could come from the superintendent office and say, no, I think this is really pertinent to what we're going through as a district right now. So I think that recommendations, and I suggested those 2 only because we have them readily available. And Stephanie, to your point about waiting a couple of months, I don't necessarily like that idea because, and again, this is my idea and my point of view, because the information that are in these 2 pieces of work are so important to carrying out the execution and the creation of short-term goals, as well as the relationship with the interim superintendent. And so I think that they contain information that we need going into that process. And again, that's my point of view. If there are any other thoughts?
I agree. I think the board book club is a fantastic idea. I think we should start on these 2 documents right away because they are so closely aligned with the work that we're doing. And then we wait until the start of the school year or the reopening when things settle down for book or article recommendations.
Thanks, Amy. Maria, do you have something else?
As a new board member, I think this is excellent idea. I really like the idea of being able to learn with all of you because we all bring so many different perspectives and understanding of the material that we're reading. So I am absolutely appreciative that this idea has come up because it will help me learn.
Okay.
Kyle.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm in agreement to this as well, but I also want to be respectful of everybody else's time and commitment, especially staff and administration. So I'm not sure what the requirement is going to be to have other people on this call, because that's what it's going to be virtual. And, the expectation is obviously we're all going to be doing our homework ahead of time. So just once again, to be respectful, because one of the concerns I have is, meeting fatigue. And we need to be aware of that, because you and I have been through that for in the last couple of years. So let's not burn people out here. And it's early in the game. We get along. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So, and we can learn together. I love the idea. I love the webinars. I thought the other night was really good. But let's just be aware of that, please.
Sure. Do you want to, should we go through because we have another workshop on Wednesday. Should we do that and kind of pick this up as far as where we want to start after that piece? I mean, sure. June? Okay.
Kyle?
Yes. Is that you, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do the administration have to be there for the meeting on what I forget now, so Thursday? The workshop?
They've all been registered, not because they were instructed to, but because they showed an interest in it.
Oh. Yeah, because I'm just thinking about what John just said too.
Yep.
It's just a lot we're asking of them.
Yeah, it is. And again, I think it's up to, interim superintendent could tell the cabinet that they absolutely expect the cabinet to participate. They could also say, if you want to, it's your choice. So it sounds like there is a definite interest in doing this. But it also sounds like maybe let's get through our workshop on Thursday and then talk about it again as far as where to begin. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would agree with that. And
Okay.
may I ask a question with regard to something that John brought up?
Sure.
So I was just reflecting on what you and Jen and Stephanie were just discussing, and I'm wondering, are we, like, maybe this is like a faux pas, like, I don't know, but like, would it be cool, like, after, like, administrators who are there, like, to present something, like, after they present, are they required to stay? Like, is that like a school district, is that like a thing that has to happen? Or can we just have like kind of like ZIP, like prioritizing of agenda items where we put things like where people have to present first and then they can like check out afterwards? And then if we spend time talking about a book, it's not like a huge waste of somebody's time.
The cabinet members are always welcome to attend, and sometimes they want to stay because they want that knowledge and information, and they want to, be working closely with the board. There are certain times that the cabinet members will be required by the superintendent to participate and to stay. So it's probably to be determined.
And I think...
Okay, because we make like a norm, so like people don't feel bad if they're like, well, I'm going to duck out.
Right.
So we're not like doing like a bad...
Yeah, and we do try to be strategic. That's one of the reasons we put closed session at the end, so the public doesn't have to sit through and look at that purple screen for, however long, or and then build it so that the presenters can come, do their thing, and leave if they're able to. But that's kind of what I was thinking too, Megan, is that this is something that could maybe be on towards the end. So if people want to, they can, but they're not obligated to sit through it and wait for their own item. So, okay, so it sounds like we'll go ahead and do Wednesday, and then we'll talk about this in the future. Okay, because I know this is a lot, and I really, really appreciate Michelle and Sue and the cabinet and all the time that everybody is putting into the workshops and the retreats and the meetings, and Dean, who is here recording, even when we're virtually, he may be here by himself. So a huge thank you to everyone for putting all this time into our learning and getting our work done. Okay. Anything else about that before we go on into our meeting closing? And I will have you know it is 12:36. Yes. Okay. So future meeting dates, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read through those quickly because I'm sure we have a lot of people watching at home. So May 20th is our WSB webinar from 7 to 8:30, and you'll have the information coming to you in a link. And after the feedback from last week, we will not do a meeting after. So we'll just post that to make the public aware that a quorum of the board will be in that webinar. May 26th, we will have a policy and personnel meeting as well as a board business meeting. Then May 28th will be a special board meeting for the superintendent search. June 2nd is a planning and budget committee meeting. The 3rd and 4th, we'll have special board meetings for the interim superintendent interviews. June 6th is graduation, and we do have to have a short meeting prior to graduation to approve the list of graduates. It's traditionally been that morning. The board will meet the morning of. June 9th, Oversight and Finance Committee, Policy Personnel, and a regular board meeting. The 15th, we would meet again for the second round of interim superintendent interviews, and then the June 23rd would be a policy and personnel and a board business meeting. Okay. Which then I would be happy for a motion to adjourn. Michelle does have something for everybody before you leave, so after you adjourn, don't go running out the door.
Kyle, I have a quick question.
Yeah, Amy, go ahead.
For virtual graduation, is there anything that the board needs to do in way of participating in that?
No, not right now that we're aware of, the board has always been at graduation and been on the stage and able to shake the hands of the graduates, but at this point, there's nothing for the virtual. Is the possibility of a August one, like a live graduation still?
Yeah, we're still, that's on the calendar. The team at the high school that, works on graduation we had shared that they are looking at August 1st as a time to have a step 2 of graduation, a celebration portion. It also indeed based on what, what the status of the state is, if we are able to gather in larger groups at that time. It also could be the time that there would actually be the distribution of the diplomas. So it's a little bit, the date is set, it's on the calendar. Exactly all that would happen on that date isn't yet determined because of the unknown with the state.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Or a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn our board retreat. Any further discussion or questions before we vote and adjourn? Okay, seeing none, nobody's unmuted. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the retreat is adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope you get outside, enjoy this beautiful weather. John, I think we need a signature down here.
Thank you.
Thank you.